Welcome back. On Gravitas Frontline tonight, we are featuring a very special leader, the Raksha Mantri or Defence Minister of India, who's making waves and leading from the front. Today, she became the country's first woman Defence Minister to undertake a sortie on the Air Force's formidable fighter aircraft Sukhoi 30 MKI. Here's a look at her rendezvous with air warriors in Jodhpur.
Great experience with the group captain Garg having taken me around in Su-30 MKI, which is a made in India fighter. For all the preparations, it was a very smooth ride. The group captain has made me feel absolutely at ease, but showed his excellence in flying. He crossed 1 Mach, also crossed 8,000 meters.
After today's sortie, Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman joined a rather exclusive club of politicians and public figures who have flown in fighter jets before. Former Defence Minister George Fernandes was perhaps India's first Defence Minister to fly in a Sukhoi. He took that flight 15 years ago, in 2003, from the Lohegaon Air Force Station in Pune. 3 years later, APJ Abdul Kalam became the first president of this country to fly in a Sukhoi 30 fighter plane. President Kalam was 74 years old when he went on that sortie. After the 30-minute-long flight, he said that flying in a fighter aircraft was his childhood dream. President Kalam's successor, Pratibha Patil, followed in the footsteps of her predecessor. She flew in the Sukhoi in 2009 from the Pune Air Base of the Indian Air Force. During this 20-minute sortie without maneuvers, she flew at a speed of more than 800 kilometers an hour, at the height of a little more than 2 kilometers. And coming to the present government, the Minister of State for Home Affairs, Kiren Rijiju, was perhaps the last politician to fly in a fighter jet before the Defence Minister today. Rijiju boarded the Sukhoi aircraft from the Halwara base in Punjab in 2016 for around 20 minutes. And I wonder if you're wondering why politicians fly fighter jets at all. What does it achieve? Consider this. In December 2001, then Air Chief Marshal Yashwant Tipnis flew in a MiG-21 to reassure his government and, more importantly, the families of the MiG-21 pilots that it was a safe aircraft to fly. He was also telling his government that MiG crashes were less due to faults in the aircraft per se and more because rookie pilots were graduating from turboprop trainer aircraft to high-flying MiGs. There was no intermediate jet to train on. When politicians fly in fighter jets, they're essentially making political statements. President Pratibha Patil, for one, was the first woman politician, actually the first woman, to ever fly in an Su-30 MKI in November 2009. It was a message to the Air Force, equally to India's political class, that the armed forces must open their doors to women. The message was most appreciated by young women out there, and today the Air Force is training its first batch of women fighter pilots. In December 2011, Patil rode on the turret of a T-90 tank during army exercises in the Rajasthan desert. It did not really change the army's aversion to women in combat formations, but on the positive side, the army is now open to having women serve in all ranks in the military police. That's a start, you would say. The Indian Navy commissioned its first woman pilot last November. It also opened the doors to women officers in the Armament Inspectorate, where 3 currently serve. None of this happened simply because of Pratibha Patil, of course. It reflects a broader commitment to the cause of women by successive Indian governments. Granted that MPs have blocked reservations of seats for women in Parliament, but women are ubiquitous in the Central Armed Police Forces, where there are Mahila battalions now. In April 2012, BSF women constables shot dead a Pakistani trying to infiltrate in the Dera Baba Nanak sector. So if there are any reservations about women being too squeamish about killing, perish that thought. And coming back to my question, it is this confidence that a sortie like today's inspires. So we've spoken about the minister. Let's talk about her ride now. The Sukhoi still remains one of the most advanced fighter aircrafts in the world. And the Sukhoi, developed by India in collaboration with Russia, is a lion in the airspace. Called the Su-30 MKI, as you heard the minister also say, and this is aviation jargon, India's Sukhoi is far more advanced than the Sukhoi used by the Russians and the Chinese. In fact, Russia was so impressed by the Indian variant of this Sukhoi that they decided to order a fleet of 30 aircrafts of similar design for their own air force. So what gives the Indian Sukhoi an edge? The fighter features state-of-the-art avionics, which were developed by Russia, India and Israel jointly. What are avionics? They're the electronic systems used on fighter aircraft. India, alongside Russia and Israel, developed special avionics for display, navigation, targeting and electronic warfare. And some of the other avionics for the Sukhoi were supplied by France and South Africa. Now, if the Indian Air Force already has such an advanced aircraft in its fleet, why are we purchasing the Rafale from the French? The Indian Air Force wants to add a multi-role medium-range combat aircraft to their fleet. The Sukhoi is a heavy aircraft. In fact, it weighs more than 18,000 kilos. It also requires regular maintenance. One Sukhoi may be enough to take down all enemies in hostile territory, but the fighter jet is known for its high fuel consumption. So the short and simpler answer is this: you cannot use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. You need both. Now, there's a lot of buzz around India's deal with the French government to buy the Rafale fighters. So why does India still need the Sukhoi in its fleet? The Sukhoi 30 MKI was developed by Russia's Sukhoi for India and built by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. It's a heavy, all-weather and long-range fighter. The Sukhoi has more speed and thrust than the Rafale. Last year in November, India successfully test-fired the BrahMos missile from the Sukhoi 30. The presence of the Sukhoi completes the tactical cruise missile triad for India, which means that Indian Defence Forces can fire the BrahMos from land, sea and air. And this means that the Sukhoi can even fire nuclear missiles. Rafale will be a new addition for the Indian Defence Forces, but initially, Indian pilots would naturally trust the Sukhoi more. Many of the Indian pilots have spent hundreds of hours inside this aircraft. In fact, 12 Indian Air Force bases have the Sukhoi squadrons as of today.